people tend to start off really, really cranking, doing, quote, everything perfect until life happens. And one of the coolest things about having a practice-based perspective is that practice is flexible, right? You can play guitar every day and get better at playing guitar. You could play guitar 3 times a week and get better at playing guitar, right? You don't have to practice an eating skill every single meal or every single day to get better. You just have to practice consistently.
That was Josh Hillis on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are 4 clinical psychologists here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas from psychology to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and co-author of Act Daily Journal.
I'm Dr. Diana Hill, co-author with Debbie on Act Daily Journal and practicing in Seaside, Santa Barbara, California.
From coast to coast, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, a Boston-based clinical psychologist and assistant professor at Brown University.
And from sunny San Diego, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty and the Big Book of Act Metaphors.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. I am here with Katie Rothfelder, who is our dissemination coordinator. And we thought we'd bring her on because we talk a lot about Praxis, how Praxis sponsors this podcast. They offer online continuing education for professionals, everything from DBT to ACT training to compassion-focused therapy. And Katie's had some personal experience with Praxis that I think it would be helpful for you to all learn about.
Yeah, Diana, I started out with Stephen Hayes' ACT Immersion program, and that was really my first chance to get, really into ACT. And then since then, I've had these kind of on-demand course opportunities. The one that really sticks out to me is Lou Lasfugato's Feedback Enhanced ACT course, which was this really beautiful mix of instruction for really difficult ACT concepts and then in-depth learning with practice. That grew my muscles as a brand new clinician so much.
So if you are interested in taking a Praxis course, go ahead and go to our website, offtheclockpsych.com, and we have a discount code for you for some of the live courses. Check them out, Praxis Continuing Education.
Hey, listeners, if you've loved learning about acceptance and commitment therapy on the podcast and you're a clinician who wants to incorporate more ACT into your clinical work, I have just the training for you. I'm offering my Breakthrough ACT Techniques and Experiential Exercises, a clinical roadmap to help clients overcome psychological distress through PESI. This is an on-demand training that you can access at my website, jillstoddard.com/learn. This is an interactive way to really bring your clinical work, especially your work with ACT, to the next level. You will get 6 CEs, and I hope to see you there.
Well, it's almost the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. We are excited that you're here today to listen to our final episode of 2021. It's been quite a year. And I know that for many people, the end of the holiday season with all the extra goodies and the holiday stress, and then moving into those New Year's resolution is a time when a lot of people take a look at their health habits and maybe want to do a little work around their eating behaviors, healthy eating habits, and also around getting a little bit more active and physically fit. So I'm here today to introduce an episode with Josh Hillis. And Josh is someone who really bridges the areas of fitness. He's a personal trainer, has been for a very long time, and psychology. And he uses evidence-based psychology as a way to kind of bridge the two and to really help people who might not find the traditional fitness world very workable in their lives. And so I'm here today with Jill to introduce this episode. Jill, what did you think?
Well, Debbie, I loved this episode. First of all, I found Josh to be just such a positive presence. I thought, I need him to be my coach. He just seems like he'd be so motivating. He's so enthusiastic. And I appreciated so much of what he talked about. I have not read his book yet, but the whole time I thought, oh my gosh, I need to go buy this book and read this book right away. And what I think I appreciated most was his discussion around using guidelines, not rules, and the importance of flexibility. And I think the reason that spoke to me, I can relate so much to all of this, but I feel like when we set really rigid rules about what we think we should be doing, and a lot of that's based on, culture and, like you said, like the fitness industry and diet culture. But when you break a rule, I think that leads to, guilt and feeling like you're a failure, and creates so much internal struggle that it makes it much more likely. One of the things you guys talk about is emotional eating. And so I think it actually makes us more vulnerable to emotional eating, and can really just kind of create this cycle, that's fueling itself, versus when you have guidelines and flexibility. I think it's so much easier to maintain and persevere.
Yes, I love that it's not so rule-based. It's because it's guidelines and skills. It's very compassionate, flexible. It's not so harsh and rigid where you feel like you have to follow it just right. And it's a major change maybe from where you're at now. And if you don't follow it just right, forget the whole thing. And Jill, I know this idea of eating skills fits with something you've been doing for a little while.
Yes, it was something that I thought about as he was talking, that I thought, oh, I'm actually practicing some of Josh's eating skills without even realizing it. And he talks a lot about the importance of recognizing hunger and satiety cues. And in order to be able to do that skillfully, basically you have to slow down and create more awareness. And so I have this acronym that I use. It's EATS, EATS, and the E stands for extra mindful. So pay attention and be aware. The A is always sit. And that came from, if I'm preparing my kids' dinner and I'm like picking off their plates, even though I'm not hungry, it's just something I'm doing mindlessly. T is for tines down. So put my fork down in between bites, which he specifically talks about in the episode. And then the S is just slow down slowly. And so this acronym is my reminder to just sort of be aware, slow down. And that allows me to really tune in more to my body, like, am I hungry? Am I full? What is it that I'm, let's just do to tune into my body. Am I hungry? Am I full? Etc. So I think that mapped on really nicely to some of Josh's eating skills.
It is perfect. There's some overlap with the actual skills, and it's really based on this idea that these are skills we work on over time, and sometimes maybe we don't, and that's okay, but you can always get back to it. It doesn't have to be so rigid. And I think this is where it's a little bit more sustainable in terms of maybe New Year's behavior change, because I think often people go a little overboard with how they're going to change everything, and they get into something that's a little bit rigid and rule-based. But then if they don't do it perfectly, they give up on the whole thing. And this is just more sustainable over time, which I love. And I think that for me, one of the things that I've loved about Josh's work, I'm just working on getting more physically active. I think I got a little too sedentary during the shutdown phases of the pandemic, where it was just...
Well, we all did.
Right. I was not one of those people who coped by like over exercising, right?
Right. And I think even the fact that none of us were, we're like, so many people are working from home, where, when we were in lockdown, even just the amount that we were walking to and from our office or in and out of Target, or, there were so many ways we were moving our bodies that we suddenly weren't anymore. So it was, it wasn't just a matter of not going to the gym. I think we all became more sedentary in a number of ways. Yeah.
Right. You're just sitting at your computer so much of the day. So many of us who telework. Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, Josh's work has really helped me, first of all, at a very practical level, come up with some doable, simple exercises I can really easily embed into my daily life, but then also just overcome some of those challenges where even if maybe like last night, I did exercise for 30 minutes, but I didn't really feel like it. I was not really in the mood. And yet I was able to kind of have a little bit of willingness and go ahead and do this thing that was hard. And I think it's motivating because it's flexible in that regard too, right? Like we're not always going to have 2 hours to go to the gym and back, but we can still find ways to be more active in our daily lives. And then when we don't, we don't. And that's okay too. We're flexible about that. And then we just get back to it when we're able to.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. And enjoy the episode. Our guest today, Josh Hillis, has a unique background bridging fitness and psychology. Josh, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is super fun. This is super exciting.
We were just saying when we jumped on, we feel like we know each other because we've both followed each other's stuff. We were in some professional groups together and that kind of thing, but this is our first time actually meeting, so it's kind of fun.
It's super
fun to
cool.
have this meeting in person. So Josh started out as a personal trainer in 2004. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is the creator and head coach of GMB Fitness's Eating Skills program, and is back in school now at Metropolitan State University of Denver to study psychology and doing a thesis on contextual behavioral science and emotional eating. So we're definitely going to ask you about emotional eating today, Josh.
Cool.
He won the psychology department's Promising Teacher of the Year award as a TA. And his work has been featured in the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, Men's Health, the Denver Post. And he's also been writing a blog since 2007 and has some great posts on social media. And Josh, you're the author of 2 books, and your latest book, which I have a copy of right here, is Lean and Strong, Eating Skills, Psychology, and Workouts, which won the silver medal in the Benjamin Franklin Book Awards for Psychology and is a Colorado Book Award finalist. Congratulations. Yep. That's
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Really awesome. And is it true that you're already kind of planning on another book down the road?
Yeah. Yes. There's going to be another book on specifically about emotional eating. That's
okay. Are you working on that now? When's that coming out?
Kind of, sort of. It'll be a couple years. There's some things that I want to do first. There are some things I want to do first. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I get that because when I read your bio and I think about all the different things you're doing, I think, wow, you must be busy.
I am busy.
Yeah.
I do a lot of things.
One of the things that's really interesting to me about your work, Josh, is that you kind of bridge these 2 worlds, right? The fitness world and the psychology world. And I know some people, in psychology who study health behavior change and that kind of thing. Yeah. And I know some people who are more in the fitness world and personal trainers, but rarely do I meet a person that kind of bridges those 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. I think that we could have a much kinder and more effective fitness industry if we brought in a little bit of modern psychological theory.
Well, how has it been helpful to you to have, you've been doing this work in personal training and fitness for a long time. How has your psychology expertise been helpful to you in your work?
Oh, it's been essential, right? Like I started studying psychology because I wanted to make a difference for more people, right? When I started as a personal trainer, I worked for a company that gave meal plans to that had a registered dietitian put together meal plans and give that to the clients, and we tried to have people follow that, and count calories and all that kind of stuff. And it worked for a small percentage of the clients we got, and it didn't work for a lot of others. And none of us really knew why, actually very few people there were even asking the question of why can't we help more people? They were kind of how do we get rid of the people we can't help faster? But I was
interesting.
How can we actually help these, and that's when I started looking into better coaching practices. And a friend of mine's what you're doing is kind of like motivational interviewing. And I'm like, what's that? And they're like, oh, this is kind of like this. And I'm like, ooh, what's the self-determination thing? And realizing that if I get really good at supporting clients' autonomy, competence, and relatedness, they actually sort a lot of this stuff out for themselves. And so it was kind of a matter of necessity. The fitness industry is really good at making a difference for a really small slice of people. And we need to get at least a little bit into behavior and intrinsic motivation if we want to help more people.
Well, I think that's really important. And I think we will talk a little bit more about what is helpful as we go through this interview. I kind of want to break this down a little bit more because you've been pretty open in social media and podcast interviews about how your practice and your thinking around this has changed. Could you kind of walk us through where you started and where you are now?
Yeah. So like I was saying, when I started, I was with a company that was giving out meal plans, right? And I started with having people count calories. and that worked for some people. And then like clients would bring in like, hey, I want to try this diet. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Like I couldn't recommend diets, but clients always brought in diets that they wanted to do. And so I got to see a lot of clients do a lot of diets and see like, okay, so none of that makes any difference. Like just even anecdotally, like this was before I got into the research on that. None of the differences between diets made any difference. It was pretty clear just looking at my clients that like the people that can follow a diet can follow a diet, and it doesn't matter which one. And then everyone else struggles with that. And so I started looking at, okay, what is making a difference for people? And at the time I was framing it like habits. And I was like, okay, so if they're keeping this food journal, like here's where they're hitting obstacles, how do we like pull out the habits that'll make a difference? And I started getting really into habits, and I started getting really into like obstacle planning. And that helped also. But even framing it in terms of habits still gave people this kind of like perspective, like they were either climbing or sliding, like they were all either like on their habits or off their habits. And eventually that's why I got to skills, because like my original background was teaching movement, and I was like, what we're doing is actually more like a skill. Like this is more like learning guitar than it is like following a rule or even like building a habit, right? Like being able to check in with my own hunger and fullness cues is that's a skill. And so that's kind of how I got here. And then just again, like all of the stuff on motivation, like when I started off in the beginning, I thought that like goal setting was how motivation worked, and like kind of silly things about people finding their why, and even clients would be like, hey, I want to reward myself or punish myself. Like, does that sound cool? And I'm like, I don't know. That's when I really started to get into like self-determination theory and loves of motivation, realizing like reward and punishments over here and like values are over here, and there's this continuum in the middle, and that's kind of how I got to here, was bouncing off a lot of things that didn't work and trying to pay attention to what did work. And then about 10 years ago, when I really started reading a lot of research and textbooks, and when I realized I had to go to school for psychology.
Right. You kind of realized there was a lot of knowledge out there that could be applicable. And that's where I think being that bridge is so helpful, because I think that, and honestly, you're usually on fitness podcasts and that kind of thing. And here you are on a psychology podcast. And I mean, I think that the things that the two have to offer each other is so interesting. Yeah. So because I think as a psychologist, I've learned more about some of your stuff literally on how to do weight training.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Eating skills themselves, which are so helpful. But I want us to acknowledge something here that I want to hear your thoughts on this, because honestly, when we talk about things like weight loss and dieting and that kind of thing, this is a very divisive topic.
Yeah.
People are very opinionated. On the one hand, we have diet culture, kind of rigid dieting rules, and really an emphasis on weight loss. But on the other side, there's this more like, anti-diet body positivity movement, and they're very, very polarized. So where do you come into this, and what's your stance related to that? And honestly, I'll just say really quickly, like we've had people on the podcast talking about health behavior change and habits and that kind of thing. That kind of are on different places on that spectrum.
Oh yeah. So I love that you said spectrum, which is something that doesn't get acknowledged, and is actually like a big hole in the research, and is actually one of the things that I'm trying to do some research on right now. But yeah, so like on one side we've got intuitive eating and health at any size, and on the other side we've got like rigid dieting and like straight up fat phobia. And I think that the thing that we need to acknowledge is that that it's population dependent. There's a sliver of people that actually do really well with rigid dieting. It's small, but that exists. And I always like to say that because a lot of times people have a friend that like does well with that. And then there's other people that like really should not be playing the game of weight loss at all. Like it's always takes them down a bad path.
Oh, it can be dangerous for people.
Absolutely.
And it can feed into fat shaming and fat phobia. Yeah.
Totally. So the other side, like intuitive eating and HAES is I'm so glad it exists, so that there's an alternative, right? But what we don't have a lot of is stuff in the middle, right? Like, what if someone's relatively grounded about body and food, and they want to lose weight, and they want to do it in a way that's not going to like dramatically decrease their well-being? They don't have a lot of options, right? Because if they want to lose weight, the only option is really rigid and often really fat phobic, right? And so what I'm trying to sort out is where to be in the middle, right? And so I think if we have a continuum, that there's like intuitive eating, and that eating skills are like towards that side, but they're not intuitive eating, right? And then like on the other side, you've got rigid dietary restraint, and then a little bit towards the middle, you've got like flexible dietary restraint, right? And so where I think eating skills fall in the continuum is closer to intuitive eating. But because we have the guidelines and we've got some structure, and because we do allow for people to have weight loss as a goal, it's absolutely not intuitive eating. And that actually is exactly what I'm trying to do research on, is I'm trying to quantify where this falls. And the research out there is kind of limited and not great. And I've got some hints about where it's at, which is why I think I know where it is on that continuum, but I'm trying to sort it out for sure. But I mean, to get really nerdy, eventually it'll take better measurement tools, and like that's a whole other monster.
Right. Well, it's so complicated. I want to just appreciate your stance on this, because I think it's where I live. And I think maybe a lot of our listeners, I think we're going to release this episode around New Year's, and I'm not into dieting culture. I think it can be really, I've never been into that. And I think it can be very toxic, and I do not advocate that. And your book just really, you actually go through different diets and like why they are not great. They're too rigid.
The first chapter is don't diet.
Yeah.
That's the first chapter.
And I've seen so many people that just, it's just not good for them to be doing that for so many reasons. But at the same time, like, I mean, I think a lot of us during the pandemic, I mean, we got these delicious hazelnut cookies in the house, and I kept like, awesome. I know they're good, right? But I just like kept eating them all the time. But it was like, why am I doing this? And it's like, I do care about my health, and I want to be conscious of nutritious food and exercise and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like, I think I live in that middle ground, and I find it really helpful. I think the kind of, I appreciate the anything goes kind of approach too, that it is a loosening up of that culture. But at the same time, it's, I don't really feel like it's very values consistent for me when I'm in that place in my own life. And I think around New Year's, a lot of people are maybe like, okay, we've been through this pandemic. It's hard, and maybe I want to like work on this a little bit. And that's where I think your wisdom is so wonderful.
And I love that you said values consistent, because that's the whole thing. The whole thing is, can we build up the skills to be able to eat consistently with our values? Right. Yeah. That's the whole jam. And really, when people start comparing like what their values are, and also the different areas of like things that matter to them in their lives versus like societal standards of beauty, that's where we start getting at changing behavior without necessarily going towards like all that like negative diety stuff.
Yeah. It's like sometimes people change their behavior, but the reason isn't really necessarily values consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, they're changing the behavior because they've been made to feel guilty, or they've got like their self-esteem is contingent on, doing behaviors that they think will lead them towards a body image that they think will help them avoid feeling bad.
Right. And I mean, we could have a whole nother episode on this, but I think sometimes that shame piece, right? If someone gets into that place, like that's not a good place to be, right?
It's terrible that the diet industry tends to make people feel like that's what they should pull from for motivation.
Yeah.
It's not effective long-term. And even if it's effective in the short term, it's not great for your well-being.
Well said, Josh. Yes. Let's leave it at that, and we'll save more comments on that for later.
Okay, cool.
So your book, Lean and Strong, is
Yeah.
not just about the title, right? It's not just about a body type, lean and strong, although you do have eating skills and you have some workouts in there. But
Yeah.
it's really also, it also has another meaning, which is the psychological meaning. So could you talk to
Yeah.
us about what lean and strong means from a psychological perspective?
Yeah. Lean's just being like efficient and agile in pursuit of your goals. And efficient, agile, flexible. I forget what, but it's in that world. And then being strong is just doing what matters to you, even when it's hard. It's one of those things where it's like, can we be behaviorally flexible, right? And can we do so? Can we make different decisions in different situations? And are we able to make decisions in line with what matters to us, even when we are stressed out or tired or bored, you know?
Yeah. Struggling. Yeah. It's like staying values consistent, even when it's hard to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in a flexible way. Yeah. So I mentioned this episode is going to come out somewhere around New Year's. And I think, again, a lot of people really try to kind of get back into the groove with healthy habits after the holidays around the New Year's.
Yeah.
And we know, right, that people sometimes start strong, but then fizzle out.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who really wants to kind of work on eating skills in the new year and wants it to be sustainable? What do you recommend?
So the biggest thing is being realistic about your schedule and stress level, and being flexible with your practice, like week to week or even day to day, right? So people tend to approach these things with like a very, like, again, like diet world teaches this sort of like all or nothing perfectionism. You're on or you're off, you know, and so people tend to start off really, really cranking, doing quote everything perfect until life happens. And you know, how long does that normally take? 3 to 6 weeks before like they have a tough week at work, or kids get sick, or something happens, or maybe it's something fun. Maybe they have like a wedding to go to or something like that, and they can't follow the diet rules in that situation, and so they drop off completely, and they will start again later. Now, one of the coolest things about having a practice-based perspective is that practice is flexible, right? Like, you can play guitar every day and get better at playing guitar. You could play guitar 3 times a week and get better at playing guitar, right? You don't have to practice an eating skill every single meal or every single day to get better. You just have to practice consistently. So someone, when they're super excited, super stoked about it, beginning of the year, they might practice their eating skills 2 meals a day, you know, and they might practice like 4 at a time. And then, you know, somewhere, let's say week 6, something comes up, or even just like that excitement that started them off on it starts to fade. And they're like, oh, wait, this is work, right? Because it is.
It's hard, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Then you can actually dial it back. You can actually go like, oh, you know what? I'm going to practice 1 meal a day, or I'm going to practice 2 meals a day, but I'm only going to work on like 2 skills instead of 4. You can make those kinds of adjustments and stay in it. And when people get good at like, oh, right now I can do more and other times I can do less, then they get off that roller coaster of on and off, and it becomes really sustainable.
You know, I think I just love that. It's so encouraging. And I'm going to just tell a quick anecdote here, which is that when I don't know if you remember this, but we were corresponding to set up this interview. Yeah. And I told you I've been trying some of the strength exercises in your book. And I was like, I even was a little bit harsh on myself. I was like, I'm not doing as much as I should. Your response just made me feel so good, because you're like, that's great that you're doing it. Like, you're busy, you know, I see great results when people just keep at it, even if it's just a little bit here and there. And I don't know, it just helped me keep going, because it's like, it doesn't have to be like I'm doing this 5 days a week or nothing. You know, it's like, yeah, I do it when I can, once in a while. And it's okay if it's not like the biggest thing in my life. You know, I think that really is sustainable.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so stoked that was helpful. But like that's a thing we do. Like, we're kind of taught by the fitness industry that we're never doing enough, right? And it's actually okay to look at like all the different things we have in our lives and be like, oh, this is an important thing. This is an important piece. And like, I've got all these other things that are important. And like, what actually, is a couple times a week enough? Is like, I mean, like it's people get really strong doing twice a week. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And maybe it's not the most important thing in your life,
Of course it's not. I mean, like, are you a pro athlete? Then it's the most important thing in your life. For the rest of us, it's not.
Yeah.
This is my career and it's not.
Yeah. Because I think that sometimes that's portrayed like it is the most important.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a great way to support us here at Psychologists Off the Clock and make your life easier and healthier, you should go to my new favorite online store, Thrive Market. Thrive Market carries all your grocery and household essentials with the convenience of getting everything online and then quickly shipped right to your door. And right now, you can get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift if you go to thrivemarket.com/POTC. I love that I can use specific filters to curate my shopping experience so I can find organic meats and low sugar snacks for my kids. Plus, when you join, they give to a family in need. How cool is that? So join in on the savings with Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. Go to thrivemarket.com/POTC for 30% off plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/POTC. thrivemarket.com/POTC.
I know I talk about my kids a lot, but I also have two adorable dogs, Tilly and Hazel. We love to spoil them, which is why we love Whole Life Pet. Whole Life Pet makes single ingredient treats, meal mixers, supplements, and hydrating snacks for both dogs and cats. And if you try out Whole Life Pet, you're surprising your pets with fun new flavors while also supporting Psychologists Off the Clock. Visit wholelifepet.com and use promo code POTC to get 25% off your first order with free shipping over $50. When I open the Tuscan Blend Bistro Bowl meal mixer to add to Tilly and Hazel's food, they start wildly sniffing and can't wait to dig in. The best part is Whole Life Pet uses a freeze-dried process that locks in nutrients and freshness, and they never add chemicals, additives, preservatives, or anything artificial. Visit wholelifepet.com and use promo code POTC to get 25% off your first order with free shipping over $50. If you're unsure about what to try, you can fill out their short questionnaire by clicking the red Start Today button on the home page. It will ask you a few questions and make custom product recommendations for your pets. Visit wholelifepet.com and use promo code POTC to get 25% off today.
Okay, so tell me about emotional eating, which we've alluded to a couple times, and you're doing some research on this, and I just think this is really important. I was going to ask you, what is emotional eating, as if I don't know from my personal. Of course I do it, right? But like, what do you think? I mean, how can people be aware of emotional eating, and what do you recommend around that? I mean, I think most people have a sense of it because we've all probably done it from time to time, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna be like, what is it? Like, as if.
Well, no, it's actually an important question because a lot of people still think about it in terms of food, right? And it really doesn't have a lot to do with food. It's just a matter of like having an uncomfortable internal experience and wanting to avoid it, and food becomes the go-to way to do that. That's it. Like you have some thoughts that are uncomfortable, you have some emotions that are kind of low, you have and food actually really works. Food works really well.
Yeah, pizza at the end of a stressful day, or my hazelnut cookies when I'm bored at 3:00, right?
Yeah. It totally works. So the trick is, it's just it's actually even fine to do. You're allowed to emotionally eat. The issue is when it becomes our only coping strategy, right? So if it's our go-to, then we end up eating a lot more than we want and that we need, right? And it's one of those things where when we start to sort that out, then people can get like, oh, you know what? Like the chocolate chip cookies my kids bake, I want to eat, but the chocolate chip cookies that I eat after after this project was really stressful, like maybe I actually don't want it. Maybe I want to find some other ways of coping with that. And so then we look at like, how do we be with those, right? Like how do we be with those internal sensations? How do we, the game we start playing is, can we notice our thoughts as just thoughts? Like we're watching them on TV. Can we notice that emotions change like the weather? in its own time. We don't have any control, and like, can we make space for that? Can we just notice that like it's 100% entirely normal to crave delicious food, and can we let those cravings like build and crest and fade? And so we always look at emotional eating 3 ways. There's like what are the cognitive strategies for being with it? Like, can I accept it? Can I normalize it? Can I learn how to notice it and get a little bit of perspective on it? And then there's the self-care perspective, which is like, do I just need a little bit of self-care right now? Like, am I having the muffin because I really need a break? Could I just take a break? Because humans need breaks sometimes. And then the third way is actually both. Can I notice and be with it and allow it to be there and take care of myself just because humans need to be taken care of?
Yeah. I love that's such a great example of how you kind of build in the psychology. And I know we both share an interest in acceptance and commitment therapy and contextual behavioral therapy. And I think when I have a client that's really in a pattern of that, and there does tend to be shame around it and, guilt, but it's that sitting with discomfort. It's like being with those emotions that that are driving the eating behavior, the emotional eating behavior. It's really a tough thing sometimes for people.
Yeah. And it's like in the fitness industry, there's really a heavy bent towards like, think positive and everyone's shiny and happy on social media. And so even just normalizing it, even just like, I'm amazed at how many clients are just like, it's not what they've been told by other people in the fitness world, that it's actually like normal to be down sometimes. And I'm always saying that it's normal to be sad when sad things happen. It's normal to be frustrated when frustrating things happen. It's normal to be bad when, it's normal to even be low for no reason. Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think even what you just said, that it's okay to emotionally eat sometimes. I think sometimes we need to build in more flexibility and more maybe awareness and intention to it, but there's no crime going on here. But that must make you a bit of a rebel in the fitness world, does it?
Oh, that's totally a rebel. Yeah. No one is saying that. No one is saying that at all. But I think I was just reading something the other day about like just using multiple coping strategies is typically healthier and more effective, and so even though emotional eating is like the wrong one or the one people are trying to get away from, like it's totally like a great tool to have in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for everyone that's listening, I did air quotes when I said the wrong one. I just want you to know that, like.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I can see you on video, Josh.
Yeah.
You want to be clear on that. You don't actually think it's wrong.
Hi, everybody. This is Diana, and I'm thrilled to share with you something that could really help you become more psychologically flexible in the new year. I have a course for you. Many of you are interested in learning more about acceptance and commitment therapy and how to apply it to your life. And I'm offering a Foundations of ACT course that is a virtual, self-guided deep dive into ACT. This course is for the general public, but also for practitioners who want to learn more about the 6 core processes of psychological flexibility. You'll gain tools to unhook from challenging thoughts, cultivate acceptance and willingness, and take committed action towards what you care most about. So here's how it works. There are 6 modules to the course, and each module offers bite-sized teachings, meditations and visualizations, journal prompts, handouts, and experiential practices. You'll get a chance to take a pre- and post self-assessment to check your growth in psychological flexibility. And the course launches on January 3rd. It's a great holiday gift for you or someone you love. And if you pre-register at drdaniellehill.com/courses by December 15th, you get $50 off and entered in to win a free ACT Daily Journal. So go to drdaniellehill.com and register, and I'm so excited to take this journey into ACT with you.
I want to talk a little bit about the eating skills and guidelines. I think people will have to check out your book to get the full picture of them, and I really recommend. I mean, your book's terrific. It bridges all of these things, like actual exercises with eating kind of skills and guidelines with the psychology part. So to get the whole story, people have to check that. But I want to just kind of talk through a little bit about that. And one thing I noticed about eating guidelines is that they're not rules, right?
Yeah.
They're not super rigid, and they're focused really more on the big picture. So tell us, let's start here. Like, why guidelines? Why do you kind of recommend it in that particular way?
So I used to work with a registered dietitian who taught hunger and fullness cues, right? And so I did that for a lot of years, and that was really cool. And when I split off from working with her, and I was doing my own coaching, I went back through a lot of my client notes, and I was looking at my client notes and looking at like, okay, what am I doing? And I was kind of looking at like, am I actually mostly doing that system, or am I doing something else? And what does it look like? And I realized that, I was doing a lot of scaffolding for teaching hunger and fullness cues, like a lot. I realized that like, it was super clear going through all my client notes that like I was spending a lot of time setting up ways to make it easier for people to check in with their hunger and fullness cues. And that's where the guidelines came from. So it's one of those things where like, it's cool to be able to distinguish hunger from stress, but in the beginning, it really works to put in like a 10-minute pause, right? Like if you want to have a snack, you could put in a 10-minute pause, and that gives you that puts some separation in between like the stimulus of wanting a thing and actually deciding whether or not you're going to have it. And that also gives you the time to check in and use a skill to distinguish between, and like the skill would look like, okay, do I feel a hollow feeling in my stomach, or do I feel something else? Am I hungry for a complete meal, or do I just want this specific treat? And if I pause, does it build or does it fade? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually check in, but like putting in that guideline is like some really good scaffolding for being able to learn that skill. Right. And for like a lot of people, get it just from that guideline. Like if they pause, then all of a sudden they've got more room to make their own choice instead of making it automatic. Or like another guideline would be like putting the fork down between bites. And that's just a way to like make a behavior out of slowing down eating. And it's one of those things where like, if someone's going to practice the skill of noticing when full and stopping, then we've got to eat slow enough to actually be able to do that. Right. I mean, we don't have to. It really helps to eat slow enough to be able to do that. And so like putting a guideline, like putting the fork down between bites, makes it easier to do the skill of like noticing when full and stopping. And those are just some of the examples, right? Like, you could eat a balanced meal, which would also help notice when full and stopping. You could eat without screens, and that would also help in noticing when full and stopping. You could do any one of those, or you could do all three of those. And so that's kind of how the guidelines and it's important to say that the guidelines and the skills are hierarchical. So the skills always supersede the guidelines. Right. So it's like one of the guidelines is having 4 to 6 hours between meals without snacking. And that's just like, if you're going to have a snack in there, you check in. It's not like it's not a rule. The checking in and seeing if you're hungry still supersedes that. So like your hunger and fullness cues always supersede the guidelines. It's just a way to like scaffold, can I maybe reset the default, or can I give myself a cue to check in?
So I'm really glad. So thank you for that. You kind of integrated a few examples in there. And I'm glad you mentioned the one about balanced meals every, 4 to 6 hours ish.
Yeah.
And this idea of snacking, because that's the one, when I say it out loud, it seems a little bit, I don't know, obvious really, but reading it in your book really helped me, which is just thinking a little bit more clearly about that idea of like balanced meals, at a pretty regular interval, and then looking at snacks in that context. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's flexibility built into it. So like, Josh, first of all, could you tell us like, how do you define a balanced meal?
So I really like Harvard School of Public Health's Healthy Eating Plate. And I like when I think about a balanced meal, I'm kind of like taking Harvard School of Public Health's healthy eating plate and USDA's My Plate and Canada's Food Guide plate and just kind of like looking at what they all have in common. And what they all have in common is that half the plate's fruit or vegetables, a quarter of the plate's protein, a quarter of the plate's carbohydrates, and then they'll have some sort of guideline about like healthy fats, and it's a little bit different depending on which one. And for our purposes, and so like all those organizations say that that's healthy, right? So that's cool. But for our purposes, we're just looking at like fullness. And it really works to have balanced meals to notice when you're full and stay full, right? Like to notice when you're full during a meal, it really helps to have protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables, right? And some kind of fiber, right? And then between meals to stay full, it really helps to have protein, fat, and vegetables, right? And so if you have a balanced meal, we're covered. And then when we frame it like that, when we frame it like, oh, this is a tool to feel full, then there isn't any good, bad about it. There's no magic about it. There's like, we can go like, oh, you know what? Like I can eat a meal that doesn't have half the plate of fruit and vegetables, and I'm not like a bad person. I just may be a little more full if I had that. Right. Like there's, you know,
yes.
So that's the deal.
Yeah. It's not so rigid. It's very flexible to, if you're vegetarian or if you're not, or if you know what I mean? Like you can be flexible with it. I think one of the things, let me just kind of tell you why this was helpful for me. My kids get home from school and there's that time of day when lunch was a long time ago and we eat dinner pretty late in my house, like for people with kids, like 6:30 or even 7 sometimes. And I realized like my kids are not eating for like 7 hours in between. And I would give them this kind of small snack. And I was like, okay, now I don't always, sometimes it's probably not super balanced, but it's like, let's have some cheese and crackers and snap peas or something like that, where it's like, it's actually going to help them, because what was happening is everyone was getting like starving and cranky.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I almost look at that now as like a miniature meal. And I think I'm not saying I never snack after reading your books, Josh, but I think your advice was like more about, just generally speaking, not just sort of like grazing around, but it's like, eat something that's going to actually kind of tide you over.
Yeah.
It's really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not about, and again, like, it's not about never snacking, right? It's about like, how much snacking do we do that's unrelated to hunger or to our values? Right. And then I'm glad you brought up your kids. One thing that I would throw out there is that the guidelines in this book are designed for adults. And that if someone's looking at stuff for their kids, I'd send them towards Ellen Satter's stuff. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Right. And so kids typically need snacks. They've got smaller stomachs and they're super active.
Yeah. So, they're very different beasts, aren't they? Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and then that's the other thing. Like before I was talking about that there's a hierarchical relationship between the eating skills and the guidelines. There's actually another level, which is your values. So it actually goes values, skills, and guidelines. So you could actually eat something even when you're not hungry because it fits your values, Like
for instance?
Oh, like I mean, I was thinking about when my wife and I were in Puerto Rico and we were walking by this place that we heard had great ceviche, and we just had lunch like not that long ago, and we stopped and got some ceviche, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
It wasn't about checking in with our hunger and fullness cues. It was like, this will be rad. Like, let's do this,
Yeah.
And like if your kids bake cookies and bring them in and like eat the cookies, if it's your values, if it's your friend's, there's a million different things, right?
Yeah. I wanted some examples just because it's like, this is not about total deprivation or, being overly rigid about it.
Yeah, like if someone knows their values and like they chose like connectedness, then like being connected to other people is really important. And you can make eating choices just based on bonding with people. That matters.
Yeah.
Matters to me.
Yeah. So I'm glad just talking about the skills, it's interesting to think of it that way, because I think one of the things that sometimes happens is that we didn't really learn some of these skills earlier in our life for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe people didn't know about them, or just,
Yeah.
We have parents who had their own struggles around this area, whatever the case may be. But I think that looking at it as a skill, like, so with my kids, is that I'm trying to help them notice their body sensations around hunger more, just to kind of check in, not a big deal, really, just to help them notice, because I think sometimes we got some like unhelpful messages about like clearing your plate and that kind of thing as kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Clean your plate club.
Yeah. So sometimes we are told things like clean your plate, or we get into some unhelpful patterns around that. And I think it is really a skill during meals to pay attention to your hunger cues as a guide. Maybe, am I still hungry? Am I full? Instead of things like the clean your plate club. So what would you say to someone who wants to work on that, during meals, being a little bit more mindful in terms of paying attention to their bodies?
Yeah. Okay. So there are two components to the whole clean plate club thing. One is learning to check in and trust your own hunger and fullness cues. And the other thing is also like dealing with your like thoughts about the clean plate club. Right. So the first thing, what we want to do is we want to actually just start playing the game of checking in with our stomachs and seeing how we feel, right? So we can start like middle of the meal, like actually just like pause for a minute and check in and go like, am I getting full? How's the rest of the food look on the plate? Like, does this look like it'll probably be the right amount? And then check in towards the end of the meal again and see like, am I getting full? Is this probably the right amount? How do I feel? Like actually check in with my stomach. So part of it's going to be trial and error. And so there's going to be a certain amount of like checking with my stomach, like looking at how much food I ate and thinking like, oh, that probably was enough. And then later finding out that it wasn't, right? Then you have to have a snack. And then, and other times, like maybe you overshoot it. You're like, oh, maybe I feel a little too full, or I don't get hungry for the next meal. And so, so part of it's just playing that game of like starting to check in and then seeing what happens. And you can even sort of flip it and go the other way and use that like, do I get too hungry before the next meal, or do I feel too full in an hour or whatever, to see, to sort of like help you learn that skill. Right. So, so there's that aspect of it. And then there's also just being with all the thoughts around, and all the things we've been told around, clean plate club. Right. And, we're going to have like, it's typically kind of, uncomfortable for folks. Maybe they were told that they should feel guilty if they didn't didn't clean their plate, or that, they're wasting food, or all those things. And so there's the logistics of managing that, right? There's like, oh, could I save this for, breakfast tomorrow or something like that, right? Where you're not wasting it, or, but really what it comes down to is, can I notice the thoughts around the clean plate club thing and notice that they were something maybe my parents told me because they wanted me to eat my vegetables or whatever. And maybe it made sense when I was 6 and maybe it doesn't make sense now. And being able to like notice and expect those thoughts to come up and be able to practice our skills and trust our body, even in the presence of those contrary thoughts.
I heard Jason Lillis, who's been on the podcast before.
Oh,
he
yeah.
does ACT for weight.
He's amazing.
Issues. Yeah. And I heard him talk one time in a workshop about the guilt, right? When we waste food or we throw food away, but we almost have to let go of that because, it's like, okay, you're going to either eat it or maybe it goes to waste. But if you tell yourself you always have to eat it, it has to go into your body instead of the garbage can. Even if you're not hungry for it, it's almost like, well, it's not like it really goes to some greater purpose anyway. It's just going into your body. So it's like letting go of that guilty feeling. Maybe next time you just don't serve yourself as much, or you make a smaller portion or something like that. But it's almost like it's too late. That ship has sailed.
Totally. I actually have had a couple clients that whenever they felt like they were wasting food by not cleaning their plate, they would actually like make a small donation to like a charity that feeds hungry kids somewhere. And I thought that was like a really interesting and that was something that they came up with out of their own like looking at what mattered to them and their own values. And they're like, well, clearly this actually like me eating, this extra bite isn't making a difference. Is there something I could do that actually would? And I thought that was super creative, right?
I love that. Yeah. It's tied to values.
Yeah.
And I want to say that for people who are interested, we have also had some episodes in the past on appetite awareness training. We had Linda Craighead on, and some episodes about embodiment. So noticing your body and paying attention to things like hunger cues. So you can check those out if you want to, if that's an area that you struggle with. And I think for a lot of us, we just almost override our body's cues. We don't pay attention. You might be really hungry and ignoring it because you're busy, but you also might be, full and not noticing it. So it's a skill for sure.
Absolutely. And that's it's a practice, and we can learn. And it's like, I like that with the workout stuff too, where it's like, can we actually like be with our body, and can we check in, and can we?
Well, you're psychic, because I was about to tell you about the workouts and how helpful. And I want to just talk to you about this a little bit because, again, as a psychologist, this was the part that is unfamiliar to me. And I think I have done exercise. I've taken exercise classes, videos, all that stuff, and it never really made much sense to me. And I think with the pandemic, I had to figure out how to do some of this stuff on my own.
Yeah.
And what was so helpful, I think you helped me get the big picture of the major movements to be doing, and I have my yoga mat, and I have 2 kettlebells, and I think four dumbbells, 2 sets of dumbbells.
Yeah.
That's all I have. And based on your work, I have created a little routine. I do, like you recommend, alternating even and odd days. And I had to kind of piece together what's going to work for me.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah. I just have to give you some gratitude for that, because I find it really empowering to be able to just do it, I think, on my own a little bit better and to really understand it.
Yeah. So what was the big piece for you that like you hadn't gotten before that you got now? Like,
you have to help me out here, but this will be good for our listeners, because I can't remember, but there's like these major movements that you need to do, right? Like kind of an upper body pull and push. Can you help me out? Because I can't remember now.
Yeah. So most of the workouts are structured around a push, a pull, a squat, and a hip hinge. And so that's it's kind of like if the body's big X, you've got like that's how you hit it all. And I think it's a great way to structure workouts and a great way to think about it and hit all the things. And
yeah. I mean, that was so helpful to me too, because it always seemed kind of random to me. Like, oh, now I'm doing a lunge. Yeah. Now I'm doing a squat. Now I'm doing a, whatever arm thing I'm doing.
A lot of them are random.
Yeah.
So they probably were.
The truth comes out, right?
Yeah. So these workouts are structured around those big movements, and we've got kind of like a regular shift in rep ranges. Like we'll do a different rep range every month, and there's depending on if you're working on higher or lower reps, we might focus on like an external cue. Like you might think about it in terms of like pushing the ground away, or pushing a weight up to the ceiling, like you're moving a thing towards or away from something else, which works really well for like strength and performance. Or for higher reps, we might be focused on like, what does this feel like inside? Like, where do I feel this working? Yeah. Which works really well for like being able to check in with what's working.
Well, people can check that out if they're interested in what I did as I kind of took your spreadsheet. I should like show it to you. You'll probably be amused by it, because can you see that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I like have an even days and odd days, and it's all stuff I can do at home, because some things are more like for the gym, but I made it all stuff I can do at home. And so it's just really helpful to me, and I can do it at my own pace. And So people can check into that if they want to. And it seems like, to me, it just simplifies it. Quick story is that my 7-year-old saw me doing it and she's like, I'm getting a snack. And she went and got a snack and heckled me the whole time. She's like, that's easy, while she's sitting there eating a snack. But the beauty of it is that I can do it in my life, like when my kids are there. You know what I mean? I don't have to drive to the gym.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Josh, you're clearly a busy person. You know, you have your work, your day job as a, trainer and fitness expert, and then you write these books and you're taking psychology coursework. And so you're busy. How do you make exercise happen in your life?
So, what's really kind of funny is that there's how I've made it work like most of my adult life, and then there's how I make it work now. And it's completely the opposite. Most of my adult life, I did the absolute minimum possible to hit my fitness goals. So really, which is really weird as a trainer. Like that's not a normal way that most trainers relate to it. But like mostly, I've worked out like twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And I hit most of my strength goals just doing that. And that worked, because I was really struggling with, prioritizing working out. That like, I always have a lot of projects. I have a lot of people that count on me. There's always a lot to do. And, working out actually felt kind of like self-indulgent or kind of selfish. And it was really hard to make myself or to allow myself to do more than that. Actually,
I'm just relating to what you're saying here. Cause to me, sometimes it's like, oh, I don't have time. I have to do this and this and that. And it's like, yeah, it's a time that it would be great to be doing something that takes care of me, but I feel like I have to shortchange that.
Exactly. So that's mostly what I did, was just the minimum effective dose, right? The pandemic kind of changed all that. Suddenly I wasn't leaving the house as much and was just super stressed out about a lot of things. And in my brain and behavior class, I did a paper on stress reactivity and moderate exercise. And I was looking at like I was considering the possibility that I might be a little bit more stress resilient with more frequent working out. And so what I've tried, I actually shifted the entire way I relate to working out. I don't have any fitness goals at all right now, other than like basic human maintenance, other than like trying to take care of myself. And now I work out like 6 times a week, and it's just a priority to, it's just that I realized that I realized a couple things. One, if I put that in, the world doesn't explode. I didn't miss all my deadlines. People weren't mad at me. I didn't let everyone down. In fact, like tracking my productivity with things like rescue time and things like that, I've actually found that, it sounds so obvious. When I take better care of myself, I actually get more done. But
a lesson we must learn again and again in life, right?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, it really helps me.
Yeah.
I want to do this more, right? Every time. Yeah.
Basic human maintenance. Who knew? Like, sleep, movement, food. Yeah. But so like I work out 6, sometimes 7 days a week, but it doesn't look like how most people, I think, envision working out. I do I do some hard days, but a lot of medium and easy days. And I do a lot of different things. Sometimes I strength train. Sometimes I do a hard Peloton. Sometimes I do an easy Peloton. Sometimes I go for a walk. Sometimes I dance. Sometimes I go for a nice bike ride outside. So, I think, people tend to think of working out as like sweating and soreness and difficulty. And most of my workouts are pretty chill, and they're really just about me feeling good in my body. And so that's what it looks like now. And that's just kind of funny, like how different it is from even 2 years ago.
Well, it's a great model of psychological flexibility and just doing what works for the situation, but also how having that variety, I imagine, makes it more sustainable.
Yeah. So like I pick what I'm going to do based on what feels like would be cool. Right. Like I try and get in a couple strength training workouts a week just cause I want to get that in. But like between like dancing and bike riding and Peloton, I just do whatever seems like it would be good on the day. And then I'll warm up and see how I feel. And if I feel great, I'll rock out. And if I feel bad, I might call it early. I might do super easy. I might dial back the weight, it's really cool if people learn to, again, pay attention to their body and be flexible based on like how they feel in a given day. Some days I don't have it to rock out. And some days I do.
Well, and you're paying attention to your body's cues around when you're maybe too tired. We just had an episode recently on the laziness lie and how we've learned actually to override those cues.
Yeah.
And I'm tired. And maybe actually that's the time to take a break, but we've almost trained ourselves that like, no, you must persevere no matter what.
Yeah. I'm halfway through that book and I love it. It is so good.
Good.
And that actually does help. It does help when it's like, you know what? Maybe a 10-minute walk is all I've got today.
That's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's going to help people sustain that in the New Year's. If you are one of those people that's hoping to make some healthy habits that stick.
Yeah. Like look at how you can fit it into your life and look at how you can be flexible with it and you can keep it going.
Exactly. Well, Josh, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on today. I've learned so much from you, from your book and just following you. How can people find you so that they can keep an eye on your work that is so inspiring?
Thanks. Well, I'm spending a lot of time on Instagram right now. So if they're into Instagram, Joshua Hillis at Instagram. I've got a blog, joshhillis.com. It's getting neglected as I spend more time on Instagram, but there's like 1,000 posts. So I'm sure you can find something useful. And then GMB Fitness is where I do still write some articles sometimes because I have that coaching program there.
Great. Well, we'll link to all of this on the show notes for today. And I have to say, Instagram sometimes gets a bad rap for giving people unrealistic expectations, right? It's so that social comparison thing, but yours is so encouraging and just kind of more of what you got today. So definitely check that out.
Thanks.
All right, Josh. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
We'd like to thank our strategic consultant, Michael Harold, our dissemination coordinator, Katie Rothfelder, and our editorial coordinator, Melissa Miller.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're having a mental health emergency, dial 911. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.